Hi, Happy New Year. I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I'm doing my December wrap-up. So I read 6 books this month, and most of them were ebooks, so I don't have physical copies to show you, but I'm gonna try to get some pictures up on the side here. We'll see how that goes. All right, so let's jump right in. So first up was Between Women, Friendship, Desire, and Marriage in Victorian England by Sharon Marcus. I read this for my seminar paper for feminist theory. I was writing about gender, sexuality, and willfulness in the novel Jill by Amy Dillwyn. So I needed to look into relationships between women in Victorian England. And what do you know? That's basically the title of the book. So I thought this was an excellent book. It is separated into 3 chapters, and then within each of those sections, there's 2 chapters each, one on the historical context and then one doing literary analysis. So I really liked that combination there. Marcus looks at, of course, romantic and erotic relationships between women in the Victorian era, female marriages and all that, but she also looks at friendship and how female friendships were a marker of femininity and just part of the heteronormative construction of the female gender, which I thought was really interesting. So it was extremely helpful for my paper, probably the most cited book in there other than the actual novel itself, and I gave it 4 stars. Next up was a arc that I got, The Ballerinas by Rachel Kapelke-Dale, whose name I probably just butchered. I'm so sorry. This was a very character-driven story focused on 3 women who were at the Paris Opera Ballet School together and who then as adults all end up back at the Paris Opera Ballet, and the relationships between them. 2 of them did something very bad to one of the others and are feeling a lot of guilt about it. And then there's also a lot of focus on the kind of Me Too things with sexual assault and men taking advantage of young women in the industry, which I thought was really handled well and is very important to talk about. And it's sadly not surprising to me that that's prevalent in the ballet industry, considering what we know of the acting industry and gymnastics and other things like that. So this was a really great book. The characters are very unlikable, which I liked because I like that. But they feel very real. I liked the relationships between them. I was very invested in what was going to happen to them. It's very much a piece of literary fiction, I thought. It got labeled as a thriller, and I don't agree with that. I would say it's either literary fiction or just general fiction, kind of bordering the 2. The one problem I had with it was the ending. At like the 90% mark, a thing happens, and it's a very big thing, and I'm obviously trying not to give spoilers right now, and that's why I'm being kind of vague. But it happens at the 90% mark and is then just not properly dealt with. Like, we don't get to see all the fallout, and it felt like it should have happened earlier. And it didn't match with the rest of the book. It felt very out of nowhere, and as if it was just put in there to get that spot in the thriller genre. But if it were really a thriller, it would have happened way earlier. So I ultimately gave this 4 stars. It probably would have been 5 stars without that ending. Next up was another arc, Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shannon McGuire. This is the 7th installment of the Wayward Children series, which focuses on children who have been to other worlds and then come back to our own world and struggle with it. So they go to this school called Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, which is to help them cope and hopefully eventually be able to go back to their own world or be comfortable living in our world. So this installment focuses on Cora, who we have met in 2 of the other installments. And it's actually focusing on some trauma that she went through in the 5th book, where she goes to a world called the Moors to help out some of her other classmates, and she encounters the drowned gods who try to take her. And she's having a very hard time with this back in our world. She originally went to a water world and was a mermaid, and so she loves swimming and water, but this experience with the drowned gods has left her afraid of the water, unable to sleep, very terrified, and she decides that the best way to solve this would be to forget all of her experiences and just kind of go back to trying to be a normal kid. So she asks to transfer from Eleanor West's school to the sister school, Whitethorn Institute, which is for children who've been to these worlds and want to forget the experience. So it was great. These books are always great. I love them. I tend to prefer the ones that focus on the children's initial adventures in their original Portal world. So they switch off. The odd number books happen after the adventures, and the even numbered books are about their adventures in the original Portal world. So I do tend to enjoy the even numbered books more, but this was really great. I loved the characters. I loved learning more about Cora. I really appreciated that the representation with her. So she is fat. She was bullied for being fat as a child, but she also has a restrictive eating disorder. And I love that we have that representation, because with restrictive eating disorders, we almost always see the exact same thing, which is a seriously underweight, small, usually white girl. And yes, many people with anorexia do look like that, but anorexia is not a body type, it's a mental illness, and you can actually have anorexia at any weight. So I love that McGuire included this representation. I love the other characters as well. We get to meet a whole new cast of characters at the Whitethorn Institute, and I'm really hoping that some of the next few books will focus on them, because I really enjoyed their stories and would love to know more. So I gave this 4 stars. Next up was the one physical book I have to show you, and that was These Violent Delights by Micah Nemmer-Reaver, whose name I'm probably still butchering. I'm so sorry. This is my favorite book of the year. That's a spoiler for my best books of 2021. But oh my God, what can I even say about this? This is a debut novel, and that blows my mind because this is beautiful. The writing is gorgeous. The characters are so complex, and the relationship between them feels so real, and it's simply beautiful. It is a dark academia novel set in the 70s, focused on 2 college boys who form this very intense, very toxic relationship and end up murdering someone. And that's not a spoiler, that happens in the first chapter. So I adored this. I gave it 5 stars. Favorite book of the year. And then we had the Diaries of Hannah Colwick, Victorian Maidservant, which was written by Hannah Colwick because it's her diary, and edited by Liz Stanley. I actually came across this while doing my research for my feminist theory paper. It's not on the same thing, but it does involve Victorian sexuality, so that is why it was being brought up. So Hannah Colwick was a Victorian maidservant, but she had this relationship with an upper class man named Arthur Mundy, and it is what we would now refer to as a DS, dominant and submissive relationship, which we think of the Victorians as prudes, so the idea of Victorians being kinky is just like, whoa, completely out there. So this book is obviously interesting for that, because we do get to see these aspects of their relationship. But it's also really important because we have very few documents of working class people describing their own lives in the Victorian era. We usually see it filtered through upper class people who go out and kind of are looking into it and then write about it. But this is a firsthand account of somebody who is a working class woman, and she writes about her routine and her relationships with people, not just Arthur Mundy, but her other fellow servants, her sisters, her employers. We get to learn about how that employment kind of works and the process of getting hired, and it was just very interesting. And then, of course, the day-to-day, what she had to do. And because of that, it does get kind of repetitive because she is, I mean, it's kind of every day. I cleaned this number of boots. I scrubbed the scullery. I made the dinner. So that does get a little bit repetitive, but it is ultimately a very important document for us. I gave this 4 stars. It was great. I did have a little bit of an issue with Liz Stanley's introduction and kind of the attitude she took toward the kinky aspects of Colwick's relationship with Mundy. She didn't want to acknowledge that it was definitely a kinky, sadomasochistic DS relationship. She even went so far as to be like, we can't label that because Hannah obviously had some agency in the relationship, and real sadomasochistic relationships feature the submissive giving up complete power, which is not true. I kept having to remind myself this is written in the 80s. She clearly doesn't know anything about the kink community, which is fair, but it did kind of bother me. And I would love to see what could be written now about these diaries by somebody that would actually acknowledge that this was a DS relationship. So then we had, last one, The Latinist by Mark Prins. This was also an arc. It was a kind of another dark academia focused on this woman, Tessa, who is just about to get her doctorate from Oxford in classics. And she is searching for jobs. She's doing her thesis defense, and she finds out that her supervisor has written her a bad recommendation letter because he wants her to stay at Oxford and work for him because he's in love with her. So I really enjoyed this. I thought that it put a nice little spotlight on some of the major issues in academia, particularly sexism and supervisors abusing their power over their students, whether that's through sexual harassment, as he does with Tessa, and sabotaging job chances, which is just awful and my worst nightmare, but also through neglecting them, which he does with his male graduate student. So I really enjoyed that. As someone in academia, it was great to see that representation. There were a few things toward the end that felt a little bit far-fetched to me, but that's okay. You do have to suspend your disbelief for stuff. There's also a little bit of mystery with this Roman poet that Tessa works with, Marius, and kind of his real identity and discovering more about him. So that was also very fun. It is heavy on the classical literature references, but I don't know that much about that period. That's not what I do, and I found myself pretty okay with it, so I don't think that's too prohibitive for anyone. My main problem with this was the ending, which was similar to the Ballerinas, and I'm noticing this has become a trend because this is the 3rd book I've seen recently that's done this, where you have this really major event happen at the 90% mark and then isn't properly dealt with. And unlike the Ballerinas, I felt that this event in The Latinist completely made sense. I was like, yes, I see this coming. But it felt like it should have happened more at the 75% mark, with the rest of the book dealing with the fallout. And it didn't. We get it at the 90%, and then we flash forward several months, And I didn't like that. I wanted more out of it. So I ultimately gave this 4 stars. So that was my December wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to check out my Tumblr and my blog down in the description box below. And please comment and let me know if you read any of these books and what you thought of them. I will chat with you soon. Bye.